Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I've read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between. Before I get started, I do have a Kickstarter going on right now for Nightmare in Wonderland. It's a queen version of Sleeping Beauty who has an ex-lover, who so happens to be an assassin version of Alice in Wonderland, and they get stuck in a nightmare version of Wonderland. So go check that one out. Also, at the end of the video, we talk about the viewer's pick of the week, so in the comments below, let me know your pick of the week for a chance to be featured on the episode. But let's jump in. I had about 10 comics this week, a pretty average sized haul, and number 10 for me is Batman issue 144. I was actually debating dropping this book until this event was over, and I thought this was a longer event than it actually is. I believe this is actually like the last issue until we get to see something new with Batman. I'm like, all right, I'll stick around for a little longer, and I don't want to drop Batman. It's a flagship book. It's Batman, but it's getting harder and harder. It's kind of like SpiderMan these days, where I'm like, I don't know if I've been fully enjoying this, but I love this character. I felt that with this issue as well. It just, I've said this with previous parts of this arc. It just feels like something we've seen before. It's spinning its wheels. It's not saying anything really new, and I just feel like there's not that oomph through the dialogue, through the storytelling that really brings that passion to the story. So giving that 2 stars, and that is number 10. Moving on to number 9, which is Gang War, Luke Cage, issue 4. You're going to see a pattern with some of these Gang War books. I liked this book because it's Luke Cage, a character we don't get to see very often. But I feel like the artwork was lackluster, the dialogue was lackluster, and the story wasn't really that necessary. I think Luke Cage and this whole entire group of people are fun, and they usually work really well together, but there just wasn't that electricity that you usually get to see with these characters coming together with this arc. It just felt like it was there because it had to be there. It's like, all right, I guess we need a tie-in for Gang War. I guess we'll do Luke Cage, and didn't really feel like a necessary part to the event. An event that has also not really been doing anything since the first part. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 9. Actually, I might have given that 2 stars. I did. I gave that 2 stars. Now moving on to number 8. Which is a 2.5 star book, and that is, guess what? Gang War, Spider-Woman, issue 4. I also was debating on dropping this book. Wasn't that hefty of a week, so I was like, all right, why not check this out? But also, I know it's ending soon to have this arc, and we're gonna still have this series, but see maybe a different narrative. And something with one of the best Spider-Woman runs, the Dennis Hopeless run, they started with an event, and it really wasn't the greatest arc. But then after that, and even, a few issues after the event, until we got to see that the pregnant Jessica Drew, that's when I feel like the story really started to pick up and find its own voice. So I want to give this a couple more issues just to see, all right, maybe it was the event and having to cross over. But I just felt like this felt like a generic issue, and my biggest problem is the balance of Jessica's motherhood and Jessica as a superhero. I feel like her voice for Jerry I like, but I feel like the balance of that was done better in, again, the Dennis Hopeless book, where it had a lot to do with her pregnancy and her being a mother, but I felt like they connected it to the main story more organically. This just felt very mustache twirly to me. But I like the art, and I think that's a stronger part of this, but I just don't know why I don't love Jessica's voice in this book yet. So we'll see where it goes and where Jerry goes, but I wasn't a huge fan of this issue. So giving that 2.5 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is The Incredible Hulk, issue 9. I didn't love the Ghost Rider arc. I thought that one was just fine, and this arc is also feeling like it might just be fine. I like elements of it. I like seeing Bruce see Betty. I thought that was interesting. This old lady's kind of creepy that's introduced at the end, but the artwork is not as strong as we normally have, and it takes away from that haunting factor of what makes maybe a slower arc like Finding an Old Lady work, because it's usually a little bit more haunting, and I don't know if this art and this coloring is really fitting that. So this issue is just okay. Not a bad issue, but I don't know if it reminds me as much of those first couple arcs, and it's maybe losing its stepping a little bit with these middle arcs. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 7. And number 6 for me is Firepower issue 30. So this is the last issue of Firepower, and I feel like this book always had a really interesting premise. I liked the characters, but it definitely lost steam as the series was going on. Once you found out that the whole series is really just about fighting the dragon and there's not much else to the plot, they kind of ran with it. And the same thing for this issue. That's what the ending's about. It's they fight the dragon. You have a very familiar epilogue that you usually have with Kirkman. At least I could compare it to Invincible, where you get to see what are the kids up to, and you have a fast forward and you're like, all right, is it happily ever after? Sure, the story continues in some way, but we're probably not going to continue it. And that's the issue. You know, you get to see the family happy. There's some interesting dynamics, but I never feel like the characters went past their initial character arcs, right? There was no other intensities and drama that was in conflict that was instilled with these characters by the end, besides fighting the dragon. And I feel like that was something that made this book a little slower, maybe this finale not oomphed. You know, there was not many shocking events here. It was just like, it was a fine fighting finale, and again with a fine ending. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, which is Superman issue 11. I like this one. I thought this was a good point A to point B issue where we get to see Lex Luthor's anti-crew coming together and wanting to kill Lex, and they're trying to get Superman on their side. We get some information about Lena, which is probably the part I like the most. I liked learning about her and how she fits into the story, especially someone who doesn't really read Superman that often. And I'm like, I don't know what Lena's been up to, because there's been so many different versions of Lena throughout the years as well. So this version I know about Lena is probably not the version that's in this comic, and it wasn't. But I liked her. I liked this whole Brainiac story. I thought that was interesting. And, you know, I liked the issue. I feel like there's some elements I'm like, oh yeah, I've seen Superman go bad before and be used for kryptonite, but I like the story, and I'm curious to see where it ends up going. So giving that 3.5 stars. Also, the artwork is always very solid for this book. Moving on to number 4, which is Wonder Woman issue 6. I like this issue. I do feel like this is a little bit of a weaker issue compared to the other Wonder Woman issues, though, because I feel like the wordiness kind of played a bigger part than the plot progression, because I think the action was really good for this book. I mean, last issue, which was my favorite issue of Wonder Woman, was just focusing on the Wonder Girls, and you got a good mix of action, but it was mostly a spotlight on them. And this issue is a spotlight on the fan favorite Wonder Woman villains. And if you love Wonder Woman, love her world, you're gonna love that aspect. And for me, that's the aspect I liked. I liked seeing the fighting. But the actual inner monologue, I think, sometimes got a little bit, for me, unengaging. So I was like, all right, let's get back to the action. Let's see what's going on there. And there's also going to be a filler issue next. Filler, you know, I know it's a strong word, but they're interrupting the story arc to tell a different fun story and then going back to the story arc. So I'm like, all right, we'll see how that plays out. But it could be very much like the Carnival issue for Batman, which, you know, we all know and love, and I still think is some of Tom King's best work. So I'm curious to see what the next issue is going to bring. But, you know, as an action issue, the artwork was so good for this. And just I like that there was narrative built in with the action. Even if not all of it worked, I do like that they tried to move the action with some story. So giving that 3.5 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Titans issue 8. And I like this issue because I feel like Titans has been trying to find its way for a while, figure out what its story is. Now you realize it's all because they were waiting for Beast World to happen. And a lot of the elements that happen in Beast World is really played out here, and I think very well. Where we get to see Raven be the evil version, but maybe, not just playing with that. She's like, yeah, I also want these Titans to be on my side. I want to be friends with them. That way, when old Raven comes back, they'll trust me. And then obviously you have the world reacting to people not liking Beast Boy because of everything that happened with his image in Beast World. So there's a lot of little moments like that I really enjoyed. It was just a good aftermath issue. If you like Beast World, you'll continue to like this series with, Tom Taylor always has really, really good art collaborators. So you continue to have that here. So moving on to number 2. Speaking of Tom Taylor, that is Nightwing, issue 111. Actually gearing up towards the end of their run, which I am definitely a bit disappointed at, because I feel like it just kind of found its sea legs again. But I'm also curious seeing what the next chapter of Nightwing's going to bring. And this issue, we finally get back to the heart, and I guess pun intended, of what the series has always been about, which is Heart Eater. And we get to see that story now be involved in Gotham. But the better element of this issue is just Batman and Dick Grayson being a family. And what I liked about this issue, maybe compared to Batman and Robin right now, is that Batman and Robin try so hard for Batman to be cool and a supportive dad that it almost feels out of character. Here, you get to see supportive dad, Batman, but still feel like it's Bruce Wayne and still feel like it's Batman. And I think that's something that really worked with this issue with, again, great art, an interesting through line with the theme of Bruce being an orphan and Dick Grayson being an orphan. I think it's interesting setup for hopefully a solid landing. So again, I guess pun intended for this. So giving that 4 stars, and that is number 2. Moving on to number 1, the obvious and also the title of this video, Ultimate Spider-Man issue 2. So the title of this video is Ultimate Spider-Man issue 2 as good as issue 1. That's a hard question to answer because force an answer out of me, I would say no. I don't think issue 2 is as strong as issue 1. But as an issue 2, I think it's strong. Because issue 1, you establish a world, and especially with Ultimate Spider-Man, the unique aspect of that is that we didn't know anything. There was no previous issue to or volume to tell us this is where this is going to go. There was just a lot of shockers of what the story was even about. And then once you get to the end, all right, Peter's Spider-Man now. Let's see an adult Peter be able to be Spider-Man. And that's what this issue is. It's everything it promises it to be, but there's no shocking moments, even though the shocker is in this issue. But there's no moments where you're like, wow, issue 1 kind of kept shocking you each and every time. This is just to see how this character gets to point A to point B in a very interesting way. Like, I really like the voices for all the characters as Peter, which I didn't understand why he was hiding his secret from MJ. I thought she knew from issue 1, but I guess she doesn't. So he's hiding that he's Spider-Man, and then May ends up finding out, his daughter. I'm like, oh, that's fun, and you get some fun interactions with the family. You get some good J. Jonah Jameson, Uncle Ben moments, which obviously is, again, the big surprise from that first issue, is that Uncle Ben's still alive. And then you get a little hint of the Green Goblin, but he doesn't really do anything here. But his presence is very known, because they make a big point that there's these 2 costume people and you don't really know who's a menace and who's not. So there's definitely a lot of little things that really adds up to the bigger world here, but it for me, issue 1 really did kind of pull at your heartstrings because it had the value of the unexpected. But I do think this is a very solid second issue, which is why it's my pick of the week, and I'll give that 4 stars. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below what your pick of the week was, and last week's pick of the week was Blue Beetle, and here are some comments about that. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and again, go check out my Kickstarter, Nightmare in Wonderland. Here's a QR code if you want easy access to the Kickstarter. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.